There's no doubt about it. All this rushing around takes it out on you, particularly when you're 1,250 years old. Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about The Letter Hive, written by David Fisher in his last Doctor Who story, and directed by Lovelet Britford, which is his only story because he went over budget. This is the first story to be produced under the last Classic Who showrunner, John Nathan Turner. He took over from Graham Williams from the last season because the show started to feel more comical and stuff. And so this story was basically to set off a new era of the show. So it introduced a lot of radical changes, including a new costume, a burgundy costume designed by Jude Hudson, who, fun fact, had a cameo in the spin-off Class. So that's really cool. And it had a new theme song composed by Ron Grinder, I think his name is pronounced, Ron Grinder. And it also introduced just a completely new style of the show, especially when it comes to music, as now we're getting much more synthesized, like with electric keyboards and voice modulators and stuff like that. So this kicked off an entirely new run of the show, and as somebody who grew up with the latest Fourth Doctor stories, the Fifth Doctor and the Sixth Doctor, to me, this is iconic Doctor Who. But with this story in particular, I have a very interesting story to tell. It was May of 2005, and me as a young boy, my mother took me to HMV, and she said I could pick 2 DVDs, and I picked up the first volume of season 1 of the new series. And they had a bunch of classic Doctor Who's, and a lot of them I had seen. A lot of them I remember because my uncle had them on VHS, and I've seen most of them. But this one stood out because in that collection anyway, it was the only one I haven't seen. At least it was the only Tom Baker story I hadn't seen. So I picked this up, making this my first Classic Who DVD that I've ever owned, and I've owned it since 2005. So that's really cool. But anyway, let's get on to the story. The story starts off with the Doctor on, I believe it's Blackpool Pleasure Beach. Or Brighton, sorry. They're on Brighton. Straight away, the new atmosphere kicks in. We start off with a slow camera shot going around the beach as we get this really calming synthesized music. I believe the actual instrumental in this music was Peter Howell. Now, during this era of the show, the composer for the individual episodes would constantly change because John Nathan Turner felt like when Douglas Simpson was doing Doctor Who, he just basically did a bunch of episodes, and he worried that it made the stories feel a bit samey. So for his run, he actually changed the composers around. And Peter Howell's music is just fantastic. Just nail it on the head. I really love the soundtrack on this. And a lot of people criticize this story for having too much music, but I highly disagree. I think this music is phenomenal. I especially like the Pengals Army March theme at the end of part 4. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So like I said, this camera pans out onto the beach in a very un-Doctor Who-y way. It's very atmosphere, it's very, I don't want to say gothic, but it's very like neo-gothic kind of way. And whilst they're there, you can see Romana and K9. And K9's talking about different places where they could go. Romana, being bored, throws the ball and tells K9 to play fetch, only for the ball to go in the river, and K9 going in the river, exploding into a million pieces. in a very over-dramatic scene. It's the one scene I don't like about this story. Because John Nathan Turner really hated K9, from what I can gather. So he wanted him out of the show as soon as possible, and he didn't like the silly dog going around in a TARDIS, which seems to be like the whole atmosphere behind the scene. I mean, Tom Baker notoriously didn't like him. John Leeson, who voices the bloody dog, said that he wasn't even too keen on the idea of K9. It seems like only really Lala Ward loved K9 in terms of behind the scenes. But anyway, so K9 gets destroyed really early on, basically setting him out off the story for the rest of the adventure. And we get to see the Doctor in his burgundy costume, like I mentioned, designed by June Henson. And my God, this is easily, by far, my favourite costume of the Fourth Doctor. It's a bit more, because it's all like one colour, but it still shines out. There's a lot of different shades of the colour then, should we say. And the scarf particularly is fantastic. And Tom Baker just really wears it well. So let's talk about Tom Baker in this story. In the previous era of the show, under producer Graham Williams, he had a lot of control, and you could see that in the stories. There's a lot of moments in which Tom Baker's just being just weird as hell and just speaking really fast, and I personally really like those moments. I think Tom Baker nails them, but here John Nathan Turner basically reeled the Doctor in. David Fisher, I should really say, because David Fisher was the writer of this story. He really reeled the Doctor in, and Tom Baker's a little less bahantic, shall we say. He's a little more relaxed, he's a bit more calm. Like, his quirkiness now comes from little snaps of dialogue. One of my favourite bits is when somebody gets murdered and their body's found with the Doctor's scarf, and somebody says, "His scarf killed this character," and the Doctor's like, "Well, arrest the scarf then," and he just gives a massive grin, clearly not taking the situation seriously. But anyway, so yeah, and I personally really like this more reeled in Tom Baker. It allows for the more dramatic elements of the story to be just much more hard-hitting. As much as I liked the Tom Baker era, the Graham Williams era, there was a genuine argument that could be made that because the Doctor just wasn't taking the story seriously, the villains too seriously, then we as an audience don't take the villains seriously. And that I believe is a good argument to make. But here the Doctor's reeled in, he's a bit more calm and selective, and there's a lot of scenes in which you just see Tom Baker like in the background, and he makes his own plans and he escapes rooms and stuff. So yeah, that's really cool. So Romana's explaining that there's a lot of planets you'd like to see, and one of them is the planet of Argolis, the planet of the Argolans. What are the Argolans? They're this race that were once in a war with the Flamazi. And because of the nuclear waste, it made them sterile, and they can't reproduce. So there's just a bunch of old people on the planet, and they've basically set up this like hut where people can go and visit, and they explain their world. They explain the history of the war, and also they have a huge emphasis on tachyonics technology. I don't know much about tachyonics, but I doubt this story presents it in a scientifically accurate depiction. One thing John Nathan Turner wanted through the series is to have more science based in reality, where a lot of the Graham Williams era was a bit more gobbledygook. Here they tried to reel it in with actual real science, and I personally really like it, and it really makes the stories again a lot more hard-hitting. But I don't know if the science here is plausible. I know nothing about tachyonics, if it even is a real thing. Going by the documentary, from what I can gather, David Fisher heard the word tachyonic somewhere and just used it, not knowing what it meant. So that's the impression I got. I could be wrong, but yeah. And I do apologise if I keep comparing this to the Graham Williams era, but I think it is important because with this element of the show, it was trying to such a dramatic change. We need to compare to see if these improvements were any good or if the show should have stayed the way it was before. And I personally I'm sorry, I'm a defender of the John Nathan Turner era. There's just something about his style, his atmosphere, the way he just produces the show that feels like a lot more high budget than the show like Doctor Who probably actually is, if we're going to be honest. It's a lot more epic in scale and stuff. A great example is actually coming up now where we talk about Romana's talking about this planet, and then suddenly the camera zooms out and then you see like a barrier effect on the screen, and it takes the scene into the stars, into what was the Doctor Who intro, which is, oh yeah, the Doctor Who intro in this is just bloody fantastic. Every time it gets my heart racing, and that music, Ron Gleiser's music is just makes me just go every time, especially that bit at the start, that I love that, just class. But anyway, so the Doctor and Romana go to this place where the Leisurous Hive, and whilst there, they actually interrupt a expedition on their tachyonics technologies. And here's probably a great example to talk about the director of the story, Levant Bridgeford. Like I said, he didn't come back to the show. Rumour had it that he was asked not to return because he went over budget on this adventure, which I don't know, but he did a fantastic job here. You can clearly see that this guy saw this new era of the show and just wanted to make his stamp on the mark. There's a lot of moments like the start with the panning, and there's also a really awesome shot in which you might not even notice. And only now me viewing this story for this marathon did I notice this, which is really cool. You see a character talking, the camera pans out, and whilst it's panning out, whilst this character is talking, the TARDIS dematerializes in front of him, and then the camera pans down and leads with Tom Baker and Lalla Ward coming out of the TARDIS, and comes out of the TARDIS, and they look at the expedition. And man, from 1981, I believe it's 1981, sorry, September of 1980, oh my god. By the time when I'm filming this, it is the 8th of September, so I'm actually watched this whilst this story was in its anniversary stage. That's really weird. When you watch this, it's probably, I think it's December a time when this comes out, so that's not going to make a lot of sense. But anyway, and so the Leisurous Hive just has a lot of great moments like that, and you really feel like, holy hell, this could have been directed by a movie director. It has a lot of ambitious camera angles, a lot of ambitious camera movements. There's a lot of great close-ups, especially on Pangolin, one of the youngest Arthgolian, which we will get on to more in a bit. And yeah, but there are some weak moments in the directing. There's a little bit where I won't spoil it, but this character gets revealed to be someone he's not, and there's a lot of quick shoots, and it keeps cutting back to people's reactions, which really good. You know, it's really quick and high paced, but something about it just doesn't work in terms of the camera angles. But the majority of the story, anyway, is just beautifully shot. But anyway, back to the story. This character, Pangolin, he's explaining how this works, and he's on the screen, and his arms and his head come off his body, and he's explaining the tachyons basically project an image and departs it and stuff. I don't really understand it myself, but the story just makes you feel like you're watching a lecture. It goes into a lot of detail about this particular science, and like I said, I really love this element of the story. It might make the story a bit wordy, a bit dialogue heavy, but because there's a lot of silent moments in terms of the characters, and you've got that synthesized music just beaming at your face, it really, I don't think it feels wordy. I think it feels just like, it sort of feels so natural. Though there is a lot of explaining in it about the tachyons and stuff. And whilst they're there, one of the guests actually tries it out because he thinks it's a fraud. And when his body parts come detached, he starts screaming in agony and something goes wrong. And the doctor tries to help. However, he is taken to the people in charge because he doesn't have any identification. He's expected to be the murderer, and so the doctor has been expected to be the villain of the thing. But however, we as an audience also see a few shots of some alien reptile creatures looking at the sceneries and messing with the wires and stuff. So there's clearly some sort of ploy. Now, we also learn a bit of the the Argolians, in which they're basically bankrupt. Not the bookings are not as good as they've previously been. And this character comes, originally is like, I don't want to be part of this, I might be backing out. However, later on, he appears in person and is like, I want to help. There might be a situation where I can help you. A small group of Famazis actually want to buy you out, buy the leisure hive off you. And the Argolians are like, what? This is preposterous. They are our enemies, despite the fact that we do advertise peace and understanding of all races, including the Famazi. There's a great moment in which these two characters are talking, and this character's like, they make my skin crawl with their green scales, and their leader is like, don't be so patronizing, we probably don't look pleasant to them, you know. So it shows that these characters are understanding, and they understand that that these creatures are just average Joe people, you know, they're just aliens, they're not inherently bad, but he still is determined not to give the Leisure's hive to the Famazi. And so we, there's a lot of things going on. Later on, this character who the Doctor gets later introduced and stuff, we learn that these creatures, the Arbitans, they have this little like cone on their head with little balls, and every time the ball falls out, they age dramatically, and this process is alright for the majority of their life, and then right at the end they start falling off and they get old rapidly, and this person is about to die, and they get a new leader, this woman, I can't remember her name, but she is the mother of Pangolin. And she explains that they found a new reason for the tachyon technology that will probably get more customers in that they've learned a way to regress the process of aging, so people who go old turn young. However, the scientist behind it is actually a fraud. He uses recordings of old people and young people, and he's a fraud basically, and he's been telling this lady that he has the ability, but he doesn't. He's been working on it, he's been determined, but he needed the funds, and so this guy basically persuaded him to lie and pretend that the process was a success. And this character I really like. He's just your average he's the normal man in the story. I mean, what he is doing is wrong, and he understands it's wrong. He feels really bad about the whole situation. And so but he still does it, and he's being pushed around by other people around. And he has a great relationship with this new female Argolian. Because they're good friends, but because of her new role, she's now she's going to have to go back to the Leisure's Hive and be the leader, so they're being separated a bit. And you do feel kind of a little bit of that loss. But the Doctor and Romana, they see this experiment, and sadly, the Doctor and Romana quickly realise that something is wrong, that process was a fraud. Romana notices and says something about a necklace, but I didn't notice it. I thought the necklace looked identical. I even like slowed it down and stopped. If I'm wrong, please tell me. But anyway, so the Doctor, so they believe that they are murderers. However, the scientist asks for Romana's help. And Romana realizes it's a fraud and helps him with the process. And this is the bit where the Doctor tinkers with the machine that the character was in. I forgot to talk about the cliffhanger. Sorry, there's a great cliffhanger in which the Doctor goes into the generator, this pod where people go in, they interact with the tachyon technology, and Romana's screaming, is like, the Doctor's in there, he can't get out, and you look on the screen, and the Doctor's arms go up, and his arms spread out, and the Doctor starts screaming, and whilst the Doctor screams, the camera pans in, and his scream is perfectly timed to the Doctor Who theme song Sting. So it's like, ding-a-ding. Really, that's probably one of the best cliffhangers. Sadly, it was a cop-out, because in the next story it's revealed that isn't actually the Doctor, it's just a projection. The Doctor's actually safe and sound in the TARDIS, but nevertheless, still a great cliffhanger. It really gets your heart like, oh my god, that's terrifying. But anyway, back to the story at hand. They work out the process of de-aging, and because the Doctor's been on trial for murder, the Doctor then is basically used as a guinea pig, and they say that it'll take maybe 10 years off. And the Doctor goes in and something goes wrong. And it's really awesome bit where I really love this bit, mainly just for the music and the atmosphere it gives, in which they're working on the regenerator machine, and the character, the scientist, said he's forgot to put the recording on, and the Romana's like, okay, I'll go to the laboratory and put the recording on, and she goes to the elevator and goes down the room. On their early experiments, they were using a hourglass, and it went down. It went back up, I mean. And when they left, it exploded. And Romana walks in, looking around just the building, and she sees that, and she clicks. Something is wrong, and she runs to the elevator back to try and save the Doctor. But the music that they play in there, Peter Howell's music, that crystally synthesized music, always reminds me of crystals. I don't know why, but man, that piece of music is just fantastic. If you get the DVD, actually, if you would like this isolated music, you can actually watch it where all the dialogue's taken out, so you're just listening to the music. I highly recommend it. It is a lot of fun. It does mean that when there's dialogue, the audio just cuts out entirely, but when the music kicks in, it's just, it's like a fine wine. You just listen to it, and it makes you just appreciate music in general more. Or at least it does to me, anyway. And so the Doctor goes in, comes out, and he's aged millions of years. So I think he said 5 million years. I could be wrong. and he's a really old man now, and he spends the rest of the episode 3, I believe it is, as an old man. Which puts a lot of... I mean, we all know that the Doctor's going to get better, but knowing that this was actually Tom Baker's final season, and they left it because it was a cliffhanger for one episode, and the Doctor doesn't recover quickly in the next episode, you do, as an audience, when this came out, feel like, my God, could we be stuck with a very old Tom Baker for the rest of the season? Obviously that didn't happen, he got better, but it's just interesting to note. So the Doctor is old, and so the story actually focuses on the main half, the second half of the story, on Romana. Romana basically becomes the main character as she solves the plot. She helps the scientists. She tries to work out the criminals, and she actually befriends a Famazi who actually helped her out to the generator after she tries to figure out what's wrong. And so, yeah, Romana gets a lot to do, and I'm so glad. John Nathan Turner, though he obviously wanted a new companion, he really respected Romana as a main lead, and he can clearly see she had potential for like a spin-off series, which we might tackle. Just letting you know. Shh. So yeah, I really like Romana in this story and the way the story develops. And it's here that we learn that Pangolin, there's something mysterious about Pangolin. The Doctor notices that the war was 40 years ago. But Pangolin isn't over 40. He seems very young. He seems maybe in his early 30s. And something doesn't seem right about that. And the Doctor notices that the name, the Regenerator, as in regeneration, as in it regenerates living tissue. It's a cloning machine, and we learn this little bit of history, which is kept outside from all outsiders, that the generator was actually used to make clones, but there was a lot of failed subjects, and Pangolin was the only survivor of these experiments to try and make the hive productive again. But it didn't work, and so the Argolians put their money into de-aging processes to try and de-age themselves. And so, yeah, a lot of backstory, but it actually wovens into the story as well. And Pangolin is very aggressive. He's very young and naive. He doesn't really care about outsiders. He's like, we need to focus more on ourselves. We don't need the money. We just need to be more powerful and stuff. And slowly throughout the story, he becomes power mad, and he becomes the main villain of the story. And I really love this element. You might remember in my previous video, The Beast of Kravenos, I didn't like the villain there because it was so obvious he was at least a part of the villain, and when the twist happens, you don't really feel it. But here, Pangolin doesn't feel like a villain for the majority of the story. He just feels like just really hot-headed and just like an aggressive bystander who just later on, because of everything that's happening, he basically goes mad and becomes the main villain. And we also had the Famazi tinkering around everywhere. We later learn that the one who helped Romana is actually part of the Famazi government, and they're tracking down criminal Famazis who go and make deals to try and sell people out. And so the Doctor takes him to the office room of the Argolian, and the Famazi go up to the bank man, the man who was going to cop out, but then he came in person and said, right, the Famazi wants to buy you out. and they rip their face off, which is the scene I was talking about, and it reveals that he is actually a Famazi, and he's actually a criminal who wanted to basically buy the hut for their own means. They were a terrorist organisation. I think this bit was a bit weak. It could have done with a bit more oomph. And like I said, the actual reveal, the editing on it or the directing on it just seemed a bit off. But it's great it's like ending one element of the story, which you think would be like the main focus, with then a slight twist as Pangolin basically becomes the main villain, as when their ship, the Flamazi ship goes out, he sends it to be destroyed, and he basically tries to clone himself, but the Doctor realises that there's something wrong with the generator, and so he goes into the generator and tries to fix it, and Pangolim's there, and he sets out this army, and Romana screams, "No, the Doctor's in there, you've got to stop!" And Pangolin like, "It's too late, I have my ultimate race, the new Argolian race has finally arrived." And so this army comes out, and this is where the march theme comes out, the Pangolin army march theme, and again, that music is just fantastic. I'm surprised they never used that particular song again. I think they could have used that for a lot more villains theme, but maybe that's what John Nathan Turner wanted. He didn't want the stories to feel samey, so maybe he was glad that they didn't repeat the same music, and it makes this story particular stand out. And when these clones then take Romana to a corridor, they kind of just stand still, and when they take off their helmets, they reveal all of themselves to be the Doctor, a young incarnation, a young Doctor, a young Tom Baker Doctor. I shouldn't say incarnation, because that's really confusing. And so something goes wrong with, and the rest of the duplicates start disappearing, leaving only the real Doctor alive. And Pangolin, getting angry by this, goes into the generator. Whilst this is all going on, the female leader, who actually wants peace with the Flamazi, because she actually let the official government go because they were trying to capture the terrorists that wanted to buy the Leisure's Hive. The Flamazi actually just want peace and just want to leave them alone. And she let them go, let them leave the ship. And Pangolin told everybody that she was dead, but actually she's alive. And so the scientist takes her body and takes her to the generator, but Pangolin tries to get her out, and the doors closes. And there's this really weird bit. The bit at the end is really confusing, because the story makes you feel like the stakes are getting higher, everything is about to build up and stuff. But the actual plot itself doesn't really justify it. The Doctor and Romana quickly dash into the generator room, and they look up and they see that on the screen the leader, the lady woman, and Pangolin's face merged together, kind of combining them both, which I don't know what that was implying. But the Doctor gets the helmet and throws it at the machine, destroying it. And when it opens, we see a newly young the leader, who's now been rejuvenated. She's de-aged, and Pangolin is now a baby, and she basically explains that this time she's going to raise him properly. And she's like, "Oh no, the Flamazi, we destroyed the ship, it's going to be another all-out war," only for a Flamazi to come out and is like, "Actually the terrorists were trying to take my ship, and they were in the ship, and then the ship was destroyed, but I understand that you were not responsible, so I won't hold it against you." And the story ends with them peacefully walking off, and the Doctor and Romana. I forgot to mention that the Doctor, when he was in the generator, he actually used the Doctor's TARDIS as randomizer, the machine he used to try and get away from the Black Guardian, to try and basically it just puts the TARDIS in any random location. The Doctor takes it and puts it into the generator to try and fix its de-aging processing machine. So the Doctor leaves that there, and the story ends with the Doctor and Romana going in the TARDIS without a randomizer, basically leading up to a potential story with the Black Guardian, one of the Doctor's greatest villains from the Key to Time series. And yeah, that's The Leisureless Hive. Overall, it is a very underrated story. A lot of people don't talk about this one. I've heard a few people not too keen on it. In fact, when I originally bought this back in 2005, I actually thought the story was pretty boring, personally. And it was only after a few viewings, did the story really hit me, and the atmosphere and the music and the tension really works. So it's one of those stories I don't recommend to new viewers. It's one of those stories that it really grows on you the more times you watch it and stuff. It has a lot to say about the politics of a weak government, of private organisations trying to take over, the adventure of trying to find youth, and just a lot of stuff going on. But yeah, this would be David Fisher's last story, and he left on a high note, in my opinion. It is a very, very good story. So there you go, that's The Leisureless Hive. So join me next time when the Doctor meets a duplicate cactus version of himself. Very weird adventure. And a familiar actress returns to the series, though playing a different character. So join me next time for Meglos. See you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-da!